on Cordy. Now recently there have been some rumours kind of circulating around, and people are, why are you soliciting our support and suggesting that we buy coffees? We've never even seen you drinking coffee. And to those people I'd say, are you sure? Why would I have a Nescafe toffee nut sachet just lying around if I wasn't drinking coffee? Seems a bit suspect, no? And why would I have a mug full with actually Nescafe cinnamon bun sachet if I wasn't drinking coffee? So with that thoroughly debunked, I'd also like to put to you the suggestion that if I get to 25,000 subscribers before April, that I will see how many Costa Coffee strawberry frostinos I can drink in the space of 24 hours. Someone needs to keep a check of that. Promise, it is a promise, and we need to make sure that guitarists like me are kept in check for the things that we say online. Right, anyway, that's enough of this. The solo that you saw me playing in the opening, on Patreon, Thomas Buck asked me if I could break down some of what was going on there, and I thought I'd use it as an opportunity to talk about some ideas that I think might help with your improvisation and to come up with better ideas potentially, or more musical solos or more melodic ideas or whatever. So what I wanted to talk about, I think, was repetition and sort of AABA form, and maybe a couple of other things around that. But if you already know all about that stuff, then maybe this isn't the video for you, but I just wanted to sort of tell you at the start what it's going to be about. We'll break it down with the tab on screen and I'll talk about those ideas, but I just wanted to kind of say that at the start so I don't waste your time. So at the very start I just wanted to talk more generally about what I think can yield a good solo, or you know, what stops a solo being good potentially. Now one of the key things I think is to know truly what key you're in for all points of a tune. So in this particular example we're in B major, or and for me, the key to be able to play melodically over any piece of music is to know at all points what key I'm actually in. And so that's something that I worked on. It happens to be way more difficult to do that in jazz, but with most kind of pop music and stuff like that, you can generally work it out, hopefully fairly straightforwardly, by working out what chords we've got. So we've got G sharp minor, a B, and an E. And you can sort of do it by process of elimination. I can figure out what the kind of key is, or from this idea of what feels like home, but that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. First of all, know what key you're playing in. So that's something that I've practiced, playing along with the radio, playing along with random tunes on a CD, playing along with tunes on a cassette player when I was young. That's a huge part of what I do even now. You know, I always have in my mind what key we're actually dealing with. I think that's kind of crucial for me anyway. Then the second thing is to be listening to what has come before. So the idea is that you hold kind of a memory of what has happened. So if in your first bar you go, that's kind of an idea that exists in your head throughout this solo, and then perhaps you could return to it later and you modify it in some way, and then so I think it helps to have a really strong memory of what your opening line was, and to sort of refer back to that in some way, or to have like a memory of 2 bars. And the way that you can practice this, I think, or the way that I've sort of practiced it, is to try and repeat back what you've just played. It's not something you want to do consciously all the time when you're just improvising, but when you're practicing, something that I like to try and do is repeat kind of a phrase that I've just played. So so you could repeat it in exactly the same place, so try and do that 2 or 3 times, and then potentially you want to try moving that to another area of the fretboard and be able to move ideas around octaves. Okay. And even if you don't successfully do that in the middle of an improvisation, the attempt to do it sometimes yields a result where even though it's not an exact replica, it's close enough that it sounds like what happened there was intentional. And I think that's a key part of what makes a solo sound more controlled or more potentially professional, is this idea of, was that intended? Now, something that is said in jazz and things like this, or in guitar in general, or music in general, is if you play a wrong note, play it again. Now, I don't think that always works, and I've seen people do this, and potentially it can seem like you're getting yourself out of a hole. But I would suggest that the better idea is to repeat things that worked well. So instead of training yourself to be able to repeat phrases that didn't necessarily sound great the first time, you know, it's just play the same note 3 more times and it will sound like you intended to do it. Instead, train yourself to repeat the ideas and stuff that you come out with that you like the sound of. That's kind of what I'm thinking and what I'm doing when I'm playing, is that if something melodically catches my ear, I'm trying to do something again with that kind of phrase. So this is also an idea that you could play around with. So you could imagine you're going to play a phrase once, you're going to play that phrase again, so A, then B, you're going to play something different, and then A, you're going to try and play that phrase again. So that's just a simple idea there, where I've played the same phrase twice, I've gone away for something else, and I've come back and I've played that phrase again. Now, this is something you could do in riffs. I do that all the time when I'm playing riffs. It's a concept that I think you could carry through to soloing. In general, I think it's just a good way to kind of practice structuring things a bit, being more aware of what you're playing as you solo. So if you're wanting to just practice some of this stuff, that's what I'd suggest doing. So play along with a backing track and just listen to your first phrase, or maybe plan your first phrase even, and then repeat that at certain sections throughout the tune. Practice repeating the same exact phrase twice or 3 times, and then also practice repeating that phrase at a different octave. Practice repeating that phrase twice, play another phrase and come back. And all of these are kind of compositional ideas that you can use in real time as well, and this is what I'm actually doing when I'm improvising. It's sort of a process of all this. There's not actually too much thought, but there is a lot of listening to what has come before, listening to what key I'm in, and also listening to kind of where the beat is, so that I'm not just drifting away aimlessly through time. I want to be actually kind of placing things sensibly within a bar line. So that's another thing I'm listening for, listening to the drums and trying to place myself in those kind of drums and be in that groove. So now I'm going to sit at the computer and show you the tab along with what I was actually doing, and hopefully you can see some of those ideas. And I'm going to close off the video with another fresh improvisation, and we'll see if you can notice what else is going on in that solo, or if anything different happens. But hopefully that's vaguely interesting and helpful to 1 or 2 people. Those are things that I think can really help your solo to sound more melodic and more intentional. The repetition of a small phrase or idea and the manipulation of that idea. So if you want to practice yourself, give yourself potentially a rhythm. You could give yourself a rhythmic kind of motif, like at the very start of this video. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And carry that through your entire kind of solo, and come back to that idea at different places and do maybe A, B, A type stuff with that. So for 2 bars you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got that 2-bar phrase which is going da 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 rhythmically. So I play that once, that's kind of the opening phrase. I repeat it, then I go somewhere else, and then I return to it. And it's this idea of kind of intentionality and planning, not really planning, but sort of having that in mind, that you're going to start repeating yourself and start giving the idea of intentionality during your solo. I think hopefully that might be something that could bring something out in your playing if you've not tried it before, maybe. So presumably you can hear that going between bar 1 and 2, the da 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 idea is repeated then at the start of bars 4 and 5. So that's a rhythmic idea that I repeated for whatever reason in the moment. What's happening kind of in between bar 2 and 3 is kind of exploration, kind of doing freely before I know that at the start of bar 4 in my head I'm going to repeat something similar to the opening gambit. And this is something that you could do in your own solos. You could take this phrase, or you could take any other phrase, or you could take, you know, something from John Bon Jovi. It doesn't particularly matter what the source is. The exercise is to take a phrase, execute it, take another phrase which is, you know, looser in feel or time or whatever, or isn't planned, and then come back to executing that phrase again. And you'll hear that I do this again in the next few bars. Exactly the same thing happens straight away afterwards. So we're in bar 7 by the first time it happens, I think. So that kind of phrase I repeat again in bar 9 by the look of it. I think this is kind of part of the key of tying together a solo, is having these little moments which are kind of like questions and answers. Something that I've seen Hans Zimmer talking about in adverts on YouTube, which I've never actually clicked. But the idea that a phrase could have a phrase which partners with it, and maybe one asks the question, one answers it, but just actual repetition in and of itself can help to give that idea of intent as well. And then what is less interesting is that after this there's some runs and stuff that happen, and for me this is kind of the seasoning for a solo. But the stuff that I actually remember from a solo are these moments of repetition, or these moments where you've taken a melodic idea and transformed it in some way. So for me, I'm not necessarily particularly interested in this pentatonic run, other than that this is the kind of thing that you can sprinkle in and out of these other kind of AABA or repeating structures, and that I think give your solo a really kind of solid, composed kind of feel, even if they're not. Anyway, here's me having another attempt at the solo, and we'll see what happens. Thanks for stopping by, and if you wanted to like and subscribe, you could. If this kind of video is helpful, do let me know in the comments. If not, you could also leave a comment, I guess. Thanks for stopping by. Cheers.